Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the most powerful platform, bar none, anywhere on God's green earth. This is your platform for education, elevation, and edification. This is the Red Pill Diaries, and I'm your host, your brother, and your friend, Rashid. So, right now, I got to give a shout out to my guy, Joel. Excuse me, I just dropped something. Hold on one second, everybody. I just dropped something. So, listen, Joel is in the building. Joel Bradford, that is. Now, I want to say a few things. Right now, we're having a little difficulties, okay? And what I mean by that, Joel, I'll put that on the screen and I'll put that on the screen in just a second. Um, we're waiting for Helen to join us. Let me hit her up real. Oh, she's in the building right now. Helen is in the building. So before I bring Helen in, Joel, I gotta put your comment up on the screen. Okay, I gotta do this first. The first one is salute, but the second one, this is what Joel says. Everybody. Rashid, and bring on the rant, Rashid. He knows I go into my rants about a whole bunch of things, so I think it's hilarious. Now, listen, I got my guest in the booth. She's about to be on the screen. Everybody, Miss Helen Buyniski. How's it going today?
Happy to be here. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Helen. I wanted to really talk to you about what's going on in the Middle East, but beforehand, we have to talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the
Of
room.
course, of
The,
course.
so the
What
election.
else?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. People keep walking into the same meat grinder over and over again. We have, this is an unusual case in which we have documented proof of what these people would be like as presidents because they've both already been in the White House. The one is president and the other is vice president. So, I mean, unless I missed something and I fell out of an alternate universe in which the previous 4 years were not like extreme utopias, the likes of which humanity has never been blessed with before or since. I mean, we're going to get more of the same, and it's going to be just which brand of shoe do you want the boot stamping on your neck to be? So, I mean, it's who's genocide enabler B versus genocide enabler A, and neither of them are sticking up for the little guy. Spoiler alert. It's just unfortunate people get all wrapped up and emotional about this, and then accuse you of being like somehow slacking in your democracy fandom because you won't, like, I don't know, use your platform to cheer on these monsters. Monster is actually too strong of a word. Monster is actually a compliment to them because that would imply that they had some sort of inner drive causing them to commit these evil acts. When in reality, it's just like a lack of any strong motivation in any positive direction. So they just allow themselves to be led by the nose, and no pun intended, by the blackmailers who are basically calling the shots behind the scenes and not so behind the scenes, as the case may be. I mean, in Trump's case, we got Miriam Adelson coming out on stage and saying, I gave this guy $1 billion. Now he's going to do my bidding or else. I mean, not in so many words, but it's just, it's ever more obvious. And the fact that people are still willing to allow themselves to be deceived, it is at this point being complicit in your own oppression because there's no need to go along with this program.
Mm-hmm. Uh, Now, you had on the Democratic side, the people were uh, they were so fatal with thinking that if Trump wins, the whole world collapses. Not acknowledging the terror that the Biden Harris administration has brought, and and the people on Trump's side, they're thinking, hey, everything is going to be peachy clean with Trump, even though we've already had 4 years of his administration. And now, why isn't anyone saying that Pompeo is back? Um, and all of the people who were just 3 years ago talking about how much of a danger Trump is, they were campaigning for him, and now they are back in stride, and nobody utters a word about this.
Yeah, I made a whole video to this effect. Like, we got Pompeo back, and they've got as vice president this JD Vance, who is basically Peter Thiel's homunculus, like spraying fully formed from the forehead of Peter Thiel, basically. And this is a guy who, like, not that long ago said Trump is evil and we don't want any. Trump is the anathema to all that we like hold dear, and all of this nonsense. And then we have Elon Musk coming out and saying this is the most important election of our lifetimes. If we don't vote now, we're never going to chance to vote again. And we're supposed to believe that there are just establishment in the world is A, on our side, B, telling the truth about anything. It's ridiculous. And yeah, the very fact that Pompeo is going to be welcomed into this administration, usually they're supposed to start compromising after they get into office. If they're already compromising before they get into office, it's a bad sign.
And I often tell people, because you have a lot of alternative media platforms that somehow believe that Elon Musk is for the poor person. And I keep saying this and reiterating this. He cannot have acquired so much wealth without so much compromise behind closed doors with the alphabets agencies and stuff like that. There is no way that you could set up what you've set up without the aid of the alphabet agencies or governments. So what do you say about people that think Elon Musk is this freedom of speech guy who I might add, censored and shut down Ayatollah Khomeini's a page on X the day after it was set up. So, what do you say to people who are still drinking the Kool Aid and believing this madness that is a Walt Disney?
Well, it's the same thing as the people who are still drinking the Trump Kool-Aid. It's willingness to be deceived. And yeah, Elon Musk has made his whole sort of public persona, or at least this latest variation of his public persona, because he's been through a bunch of them, on being Mr. Free Speech Hero by doing limited hangouts of information that was already public. So he'll repackage it, actually take away information that might have incriminated him or his friends, as in the case of the Twitter files. Like, all that information was made public when the states of Missouri and Louisiana sued the Biden administration for basically having a bunch of agencies to collude with social media platforms to censor and deplatform people who were challenging the narrative on COVID. So Elon Musk just took information that was already being made public to try to get out in front of it, so Twitter wouldn't look like it was like completely complicit with the thing. And Elon Musk is a military contractor. He's got his money from Pentagon contracts and from government subsidies to Tesla. Electric cars are A, not environmentally friendly at all. That's a huge joke. B, not efficient in any way. C, a total ripoff. If you take the government subsidies away, no one would be able to afford these things. And another development that a lot of people don't really know about, which I only recently became aware of, they're actually doing under the Trump administration last time. They initiated a program to do these mineral surveys of the entire country to find lithium deposits and rare earth mineral deposits under the land. So basically, if they find lithium deposits under your land, forget about your property that you thought you owned. That's going to be taken for mining, because we have to be competitive with China. And conservatives who were previously like pro property rights and pro, like, if you buy it, you own it and all that, well, they're going to fall right in line, because, China, big scary China. We got to be competitive. And that means we got to steal your land. So yeah, Elon Musk is a joke, and the people who worship the ground he walks on, they just want a superhero. I mean, there's a reason the guy dressed up as Iron Man for Halloween, and there's a reason that he uses that as his profile picture. He's not very subtle, and I don't think he's nearly as bright as people claim he is. I think that he was born on third base and believes he hit a home run. And it's just like he's got government subsidies and military contracts. Military contracts are not awarded based on merit. Military contracts are based on who you know and who you've been blackmailed into supporting. So that's a joke. And the technology that has made him so much money, he didn't come up with it. In the case of the rockets, he stole that from the Russians. In the case of the Tesla, it wasn't his electric car technology; it was somebody he was working with. In the case of PayPal, he just sort of ended up being in the right place at the right time, and that's a whole complicated saga. But it wasn't his idea, basically, and none of the stuff is his idea. It's always just he happens to be the public face of, and the public face. How much plastic surgery has this guy had? Again, we're supposed to believe a guy who isn't even comfortable with looking at himself in the mirror, and he's had millions of dollars worth of plastic surgery to make himself look like the hero he wants you to believe he is. I mean, yes, there are worse tech CEOs, but under Elon Musk, the amount of government censorship requests that Twitter has complied with has actually gone up from 50% to over 80%. And probably because he put Linda Yaccarino in charge, people tend to overlook that gaping incongruity with Mr. Free Speech Hero. Freedom of speech, not freedom of reach. Okay, well, when I post on Twitter now, I have the same amount of followers that I did before Elon Musk took over, basically the same. And but now I only get like a fraction of the engagement because, freedom of speech, not freedom of reach. If you're shouting into a void, I mean, you might as well use Facebook. That's why I left Facebook. I could post and post and post, but no one would ever see my posts. Same thing with Twitter now. It's sad that people are falling for this, but it's because they want to have somebody else take the responsibility of leading them into the future. Nobody wants to have the responsibility for fixing their own existence. They want a hero to do it for them, whether that's Trump or Musk, or I don't even know what the Harris supporters, if there are any in real life, have as their hero. I don't think, I mean, even the people who voted for her didn't like her. She's just like a stand-in for, I don't know, avoid onto which to protect your hopes and dreams.
So do you think? Why do you think that no one like covered this situation right here? This was a stickler for me. Um, recently we talked about the so-called Diddy files, right? With the freak offs and everything. Why didn't
Yeah.
anybody bring up the Jeff Epstein files on Pedophilia Island with these people? These one person was a candidate for president who won, and other people that are in Congress or power brokers were on the islands also. So we give a lot of face time, a lot of airtime to surviving R. Kelly and surviving P. Diddy, but nobody talks about surviving Jeffrey Epstein, and no media, alternative or mainstream, even hissed about it. Why?
Because they didn't want it coming out if they were on the tapes, obviously. I mean, when you have a certain subgroup of people who control the mainstream media and they don't want information to get out there, information is not going to get out there. Unfortunately, too much of the alternative media is either bought off or just blindly takes their cues from mainstream media. I can't tell you how many like supposedly alternative media, they just get up there and do commentary on what they see on CNN. So, of course, if it's not covered at all in the mainstream, then it's not going to be covered by these supposedly crusading journalists. There's a lot of cowardice going around in the alternative media, and they'll go after what gets clicks. Sure, I mean that's just lazy, but they're also concerned about. I mean, their sponsors may or may not be implicated in like an Epstein type ring. Certainly, if they did dig into the Epstein thing at any great length, they would understand that this is just one of many of these Israeli governed blackmail operations that are meant to entrap politicians. I mean, to some degree, it is just clickbait because people love reading about celebrities, or at least we're told we love reading about celebrities. So I think a lot of people by default read about celebrities because I think it's what they're supposed to enjoy. But I don't even want to go off on that tangent because I'll be ranting for quite a while. But I think the Epstein thing, it was too hot for them to handle because it would require them to acknowledge certain other truths that they weren't really prepared to go into. It's like in a legal situation where if you're a lawyer and you're questioning a witness, you don't ask them a question that you don't know what the answer is because they might say something that you're not prepared. Yeah. Sorry?
I'm sorry. Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. We're having technical difficulties.
Okay, your volume just cut out. I can't hear you now. Your sound is gone.
See if we can stop this.
Okay.
Can you hear me good?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. Now, finish what you were saying.
Oh, I was just saying that one of
the technical problems right now. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, now it's getting kind of jumpy. But what I was saying before was just that the reason, one of the reasons, at least, why they don't talk about Epstein is because in the same way that like a lawyer questioning a witness in court isn't supposed to ask a question that they don't know how the witness is going to answer in case it opens up a whole can of worms that then further implicates their client in whatever. A lot of alternative media people were hesitant to poke the Epstein bear because it might have opened up a cascade of things that either cause them to question or cause their audience to question their hero or their legitimacy or their sponsor's legitimacy or their favorite politician or whatever. They knew that there was something much bigger underneath and they didn't really even want to go there. Because, you're not going to get invited on all the fancy podcasts if you start talking about things like Israeli blackmail of politicians, even though it's not even an open secret. It's a stated secret. I mean, Netanyahu is on film talking about America as a thing you can move very easily. How do you think that moving happens? It's not by giving them a tray of brownies when you go over to visit their house. No, it's blackmail.
Mm. Well, do you think the situation in Africa, with the influx of terrorism by NATO and the situation in West Asia, or what they call the Middle East, do you think that Trump will uphold his word and and sue for peace, or do you think it's just talk to get into the White House and things will just escalate?
Unfortunately, I think it's just talk because he did this last time too. Remember, he said he was going to bring all the troops home and he was going to end the wars. And he talked a really good game in 2016. He convinced a lot of people to vote for him with that rhetoric, and he's doing it again. And he was never held to account for not keeping those promises. So he has no reason to keep them this time. I think it's just going to be a repeat of the last time. Unfortunately, I mean, I wish that it was different, but he's given no reason to suspect that it's anything other than a bunch of hot air. People are so desperate for even the slightest smidgen of like a little shred of raw meat to be tossed to them in terms of peace, and that's all he's doing again. When just Pompeo, that should answer that question.
But how can America continue on? This is what I'm saying. This is the dynamics of what just transpired, be it Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, with the provocative policies that the United States continues to pursue, with the provocations and with all of the escalation. How can he keep to any of his promises when America is essentially bankrupt and the outside world is moving on without Europe and without the US?
That is a good question. I mean, I thought the U.S. was going to collapse before the end of Biden's term. I was convinced it would have been completely in shreds by now. But there's a lot to be said for the power of inertia, the power of shared delusion. I mean, we have a lot of people who have all agreed that they're going to believe very hard in the power and the significance and the value of the U.S. dollar, even though there hasn't been anything backing it up for so many years. And it's just that so many people have invested their entire existence and all their work in it. It's just this shared delusion that has taken on a life of its own. And so even though BRICS has come out and basically said, we're going to stand up against this with our own currency that's actually backed by something, and there's a lot more of us who have a lot more natural resources and a lot more military power than you do. I mean, if anything, the Ukraine war should have made the rest of the world realize that the U.S. military might that used to back up the valueless petrodollar is now just basically a kid running around with a bed sheet on going boo and hoping that the rest of the world quakes in their boots and gives up their natural resources for nothing. It's really I've never seen it in quite this dire situation, but I think that they're just going to keep doing the same thing and hoping that they can the hot potato pass it until the next one, and hope that by the time that the potato ends up in somebody's hands and they drop it. I'm mixing my metaphors here. I'm thinking of musical chairs, but yeah, musical chairs. Last one out, please turn out the light. The U.S. dollar value collapsing. Trump is hoping he'll be out of office before that happens. I don't see him changing direction just because what else are we going to do? We don't have the ability to come in like China does and build infrastructure in African countries or offer them military protection like Russia is doing with Wagner Group in northern, what used to be French Africa. We don't have anything else to offer except running around being a bully, and that's why we have forged an impenetrable alliance with Israel. Well, aside from the blackmail thing, but just because we don't have anything else to offer. If you cut America off from China today and said, "Okay, make all your own stuff," we'd starve. It's that simple.
Well, I want to go back to something. You brought up something, and as you were talking, it was a real good point because you talked about the lithium, and I noticed that no one talked about what's going on in Bolivia right now and how Elon Musk has his hands all in that little dirty pot of them trying to assassinate former Bolivian president Evo Morales, and how they're trying to break up Evo Morales and the Bolivian party that he is the head of, because they're trying to turn the incumbent president, and Evo Morales against each other because of the massive lithium mines that they found down there, and that Bolivia was going to leverage for infrastructure and for investment from China, Russia, and the global South. That didn't even skirt the pages of any news along the election cycle. And why is that?
Well, I mean, the election cycle itself, I've been saying, is meant to distract from these more serious issues that do actually have some sort of bearing on people's lives. I mean, if the people who ignore what's going on in Bolivia right now with lithium do so at their own peril, because it is coming to the U.S. soon with this mineral surveying program. I mean, I think the reason why they don't talk about it is because, again, you've got people who control the media who are deeply invested in these mining operations and these lithium operations. Elon Musk, of course, saying, "Oh, we'll coup whoever we want to." Oh, really? That's really classy, Elon. And then he's got a million bots cheering him on so that people just fall in line behind that. People are just so willing, especially when they don't really know a lot about something and they don't want to admit they don't know a lot about something. They'll just go along with whoever's shouting the loudest. And unfortunately, when you've got Elon Musk controlling the entire platform of Twitter, they're like, the proliferation of bots since Elon Musk took over, by the way, is out of control. And it's funny that he like complains about bots, because it's just it was like black and white, the night and day difference between before, when you maybe, I mean, there were some bots, but afterwards, just constant my inbox stream of like messages from bots. So I don't want to get up on that tangent, but yeah, the thing with Bolivia is the thing with most of the global South. For the Americans, it's out of sight, out of mind. We don't even know where half these countries are on a map. People might associate Bolivia. Maybe they'll think, oh, cocaine. Well, no, lithium actually is much more valuable. They see the CIA can traffic cocaine from anywhere. The lithium, they think it's weak, and because they see a socialist government who's helping its people. Evo Morales has done more for the people of Bolivia than the United States ever possibly could when sending in its major corporations, and they see that as weak. Basically, if you're not a predator, then you're seen as weak and you're seen as a target, especially if you have a lot of natural resources. It's the same thing they've been doing in Venezuela, trying to topple that government for decades now. And it's just, they don't get the picture that the people are not going to go along with this. I mean, they did successfully remove Morales from power for about, what was it, a year? They had that horrible woman in there. And then they got her out because people weren't having it. And unfortunately, this lithium, the gold rush for lithium is going to disrupt a lot of people who were just, trying to make a living and trying to have a country, and trying to just like the idea that this is for the environment it just makes me really angry, because it's destroying. I mean, if you look at what these lithium mines do to the land that they're built on, we'll be done in 10 years and we'll just we'll put the water back when we're done. Oh, really? You want to drink that water? I don't think so. So yeah, that's unfortunately it's just out of sight, out of mind.
I'm going to go into the chat for 1 second, and then I want to bring, while we're on the lithium, it has a direct connection with Iran, Israel, and what is going on in the Middle East. So first, I want to just go into the chat real quick. Vera says Pompeo is such a grotesque character. Let me put this on the screen because this keeps jumping. It's such a grotesque character. They are so blatant about everything because they get away with everything. Like Helen said, not even waiting until they are in office. Absolutely right. And anybody go back and look at what the arguments between Trump and Pompeo beforehand. And then now Pompeo he campaigned for Trump. And now Trump is talking about how good of a man Pompeo is. But let me go down. Nettie says BRICS versus you win in the end. I keep saying BRICS is not the permanent. I don't think BRICS is the permanent organization. I think Mehdi says, guess where a large pocket of lithium has been found? Maine. I gotta give a shout out.
There's a lot of large pockets of lithium across the United States. Like I said, you're going to lose your land if you're not careful.
Yeah, eminent domain. My guy Dolan Duckett, he says to Helen, and thank you for the $5 super chat. He says to Helen, as an RT journalist, have you faced any harassment by the U.S. government?
Yeah, and without going into too much detail, yes, I have faced harassment by the U.S. government. Not nearly the level that some people have, and I'm grateful for that. But they have a million little ways to just kind of make your life difficult, and it's unfortunately these people are predators and they don't like being questioned in their predation. So,
yeah. Now, I want to go back to something. I'll put this up here. Perseverance Chameleon says, I'm groaning in agony. I can't believe Pompeo is coming back. But that's what Helen was alluding to. But nobody talks about Iran and the large lithium discovery from last year. And could this be one of the impetus on the escalation? Because Iran found, it says they found in the Hamadan province, the Western Hamadan province, they found deposits in estimated to contain over 8.5 million tons of lithium, and they are also finding other possible areas in Iran for lithium. So could this be an impetus for the escalation? Because you see, America has built up her troops over there, and she's demanding that Iran does not respond when Iran has the inherent right to respond to the provocations, and she has nuclear capable B-252s, bombers over there. Is this positioning for a war with Iran because they believe that they can take Iran and take the lithium?
I mean, it's one of the reasons, certainly. There's never any just one reason why they do things like this. I
Right.
think that the discovery of the lithium probably did add to the momentum in terms of like Israel trying to, but Israel's been on this just like death wish spree in terms of picking fights with, like escalating the fights that it's picking with its neighbors ever since they allowed October 7th, they facilitated October 7th. And Iran, unfortunately, unfortunately for Israel, because Iran actually is a stable country with a solid military and a population who is quite knowledgeable about what the United States can do in terms of disrupting their civil society. I mean, they tried to do so many of these BS like civil revolutions, the Green Revolution, that thing last year with the women. Oh yeah. We haven't seen this playbook a million times before. The United States thinks Iran is stupid, but definitely the lithium would have added to the pile of reasons that the United States has for doing Israel's bidding and trying to take out Iran, certainly.
Vera, I believe that is right. What you said, isn't Morales the first native South American president in modern times? I believe he is.
Wasn't Chavez? I thought Chavez was native also. Hugo Chavez.
But Chavez, he was part black.
Oh, okay.
So he was indigenous, but he's part black. So is Maduro. He's part black also.
Okay.
But let me go. Joe Rio. Let me say something. Rio. I'm apolitical. I don't care if Trump won or if Harris won. It doesn't make, because
it's all the same. Two wings on the same bird.
There's two sides of the same coin, just uttering different perspectives. Now, this is what you say. Like I said, everybody has a right to speak on the platform and have to have a right to voice their opinions. That's why I'm putting yours up here, just like I put others up here. And you say under Biden, uniparty, deep state U.S. became a warmongering oligarchy, treating Americans like serfs, pushing us into poverty, homelessness. The people spoke, Trump won, come to terms. Well, we have already accepted that Trump has been stated as the next president, but America has been an oligarchy for a long time, and has been warmongering most of its existence. If you don't mind, America has been at war for 220 some years of her 240 some years of existence. So this comes as no surprise. And as the uniparty, the uniparty has been in existence. That's why no matter what goes on, in Congress, you'll see them arguing with each other, but they're all lock in step with Israel. They're all lock in step in war. So there's been an oligarchy, a uniparty, regardless to who has been in the White House. I understand, and I know if you're a Trump supporter, that's good, and I'm happy that your candidate won for you. I'm not for either candidate because I know where this ends. Do you have anything to say on what Mr. Joe Rio says?
Nope, I pretty much agree with what you said. I mean, this oligarchy situation has been going on at least as long as I've been alive, and as long as I've been paying attention to politics, and as I can read history, so it goes back all the way pretty much to the beginning of the situation and the warmongering as well. This idea that this only recently happened with Biden or happened with Obama, that was the previous narrative. It's like people just have very short memories, and I'm sorry, Trump dropped more bombs in his one term in office than Obama did in two. And that's a lot of bombs, because Obama dropped even more than Bush did. So this idea that Trump is somehow not a warmonger or he's the peace candidate or something, I mean, you're kidding yourself.
Yeah. And remember this. backing up what she says, Obama dropped more bombs on black and Muslim countries than all of the presidents that preceded him. So that's saying something if Trump comes in after and drops more bombs than Obama. So that says a lot right there. So on this platform, we try to deal with a lot of facts. I'm glad that you're happy that your candidate won, but I'm not for or against either one of them because I believe both of them are run by the same crew. Trump is just a little bit off, and I think he's a little bit harder to control because you know he feels himself sometimes, and I think he's a little bit harder to control. But they never stray too far from the main script that is written. You know, I remember, and I'll let Helen comment on this. I remember talking to, excuse me, one of the co-founders of 911 for Scholars for Truth, um, um, Kevin Barrett.
Oh,
And
yeah,
Kevin Barrett talked about both of them, Biden and Trump, in their beginnings and who put them in power and who gave their connections or whatever. And he said that I was telling him about what F. William Engdahl said. And F. William Engdahl is the gentleman in Germany who coined the phrase full spectrum dominance. And he said, you cannot ascend to the position of presidency without the approval of the people behind closed doors. And if you step out of line, they'll kill you. This goes exactly close to what what Vladimir Putin says, that when you're running for president in the United States, you have all of these ideas that you're going to do this and you're going to do that, and then when you're elected, some men in black suits come from behind the closed doors and tell you what you will do and what you won't do. Helen, I know you have something to say on the matter. Go ahead.
Yeah, and what you said about if you step too far out of line, they'll kill you. I mean, one thing that I predicted might happen if hell freezes over and Trump actually does try to follow through on some of his promises. Well, that's why they put this J.D. Vance in as vice president, because he's a puppet of Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel is Mr. Security State. Palantir is buddy with the CIA, NSA, basically facilitated the entire UK lockdown. And they're international police state enforcers. And they're a very, very sinister bunch. And so if Trump steps out of line, then he gets removed and J.D. Vance becomes president, aka Peter Thiel becomes president. And that is a really scary situation. I don't think anyone's going to want to live in a world where Peter Thiel has got his hand on the nuclear button.
And I think that was very strategic, very smart of the people behind closed doors. Trump, if you want to run again, we'll allow you to run. But you got to compromise and bring our guy in behind closed. That's going to be right there. So this puts pressure on Trump from behind. So even if he wanted to stray from the mainstream policies, he knows that there's a guy behind him that if he's taken out, that'll take on the role and do exactly what the power brokers behind closed doors are saying. So I think that, as Gregory Mannarino often says, and I say often, that this was a selection and not an election. What do you say on that, Helen?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, nobody gets to the level of national politics without being thoroughly compromised on multiple axes, whether it's through sexual blackmail, whether they've got financial blackmail, or there's all kinds of ways that they can do this, except with the possible exception of Thomas Massie. I can't figure out, they don't seem to have anything on him because he's actually gone out and exposed how, everyone in Congress still has an AIPAC babysitter and Israel still controls Congress. And that's really bad. Maybe Israel shouldn't control Congress. This is like the fact that nobody else in Congress is saying this is like, it beggars belief if you actually believe that these people are saying their genuine truths. When we see how many standing ovations Netanyahu gets for going in there and talking up his genocide. The first most graphic, extreme, live streamed Technicolor genocide in human history. And the fact that this is A-OK with all US politicians with like the handful of exceptions. I mean, I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. So yeah, this idea that these politicians are for America first is idiotic.
And each president continues to up the budgetary expenses for Israel. They give them free weapons. They give them money, and then that money comes right back and buys the congressmen and the congresswomen the lobbyists come right back in and use that same money that was appropriated to Israel to then buy the congressmen to do the bidding of the Zionists, the Christian Zionists. Now, I watched some of the stuff leading up to the election, and I saw little to no difference between Harris and Trump on Iran, on Israel, on the Middle East, on Gaza, on Lebanon, on Syria. I saw little to none. Neither were talking about evacuating the illegal outpost that occupies a third of Syria. None was talking about the heinous crime of assassinating leaders that you negotiated with. You bombed them after they negotiated for a ceasefire, and you took out 6 blocks, killing over 500 civilians to do that. Nobody talked about the constant bombardment of Palestine, Gaza, and the West Bank. No one talked about the Israeli act of war that was committed when it bombed the embassy, the consulate next to the embassy, killing officials and military officials. No one talked about the assassination of Haniyeh. Nobody talked about the assassination of Nasrallah. They talked about it as if it was a good thing, ignoring that these were all in violation of the UN Charter and UN law. And the United States says that they will support that and put their weight behind that. Both candidates bagged
Not
that.
only
So it's hard for me to see a difference. What about you, Helen?
Yeah, I mean, not only do they support that, and not only do they put their weight behind that, but some of them have actually put forth. Now, I don't know if Trump or Harris actually made any mention of this bill, but there are members of Congress who actually put out a bill that any international law body like the International Court of Justice or the ICC that attempts to censure Israel by pointing out that it's violating every international law that's ever been passed ever regarding genocide and culturecide. I mean, because Israel is deliberately systematically destroying every institute of education, hospitals, every sort of aspect of the infrastructure of society that Palestine needs in order to be a functional country, just on the off chance that it might someday become a country. They want to make sure that that's completely impossible. That anybody who censures that behavior will be punished by the United States. So that's like next level Stockholm syndrome. It's like, not only are we supposed to turn a blind eye to your genocide, but if we don't support your genocide, then we're going to get sanctioned, we're going to get punished. But yeah, between Harris and Trump, there is no daylight on the question of Israel. They both want to bomb Iran into the Stone Age. They both think that what's going on in Palestine in terms of the wholesale slaughter of civilians is A-okay. They both, neither of them bat an eyelash at the ridiculous notion that all Lebanese people in Beirut secretly have like bombs hidden in their kitchens, and that's why we have to level 6 apartment buildings to get one dude. Totally. And like with really crappy like 3D modeling software that Israel uses, and they point at calendars and say, this is proof of terrorism. No, it's the days of the week, dude. It's the days of the week. But it's just, and the fact that people allow them to both hold these completely untenable positions with regard to any basic morality that anyone could possibly have, in the hopes that they are not going to turn around and then do it to the United States citizen. Well, a newsflash, they're already doing it to United States citizens. Police departments all over the United States send their cops over to Israel to train by beating up Palestinians in the West Bank or in various other parts of the occupied territories. And then they come home and they beat the crap out of Americans using the techniques they learned over there. So, I mean, and that's just one tiny fraction of all of the programs of oppression that are being imported wholesale and being used on U.S. citizens. So this idea that, oh, well, we can just, that he's good on everything else or she's good on everything else. And it's just foreign policy, it doesn't really affect me. Well, actually it does, because you're next. Once they finish massacring everybody in what they consider Greater Israel, which consists of the parts of Palestine, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, and Syria and Turkey that they're trying to steal, then it's open season on Americans, because they want what we have, even though we don't have a lot anymore because they've stolen most of it. They're stealing everything that's not nailed down, and then they're going to come back and steal the nails. So unfortunately, looking the other way while both of them cheerlead genocide, it's going to end up with you getting a boot up your ass. And there's no two ways about it. I don't understand how people can just excuse these things. It's ridiculous.
And there's not too much difference on their foreign policy. Also, the only difference that I saw is that Harris wanted to up the ante in Ukraine. Trump wanted to dial down Ukraine so that he can focus on China. But there was no real departure from U.S. imperialism. As a matter of fact, Mr. Trump even said, let me see if I have a clip too. I'll leak the clips, but I know I have a few clips which go along with this. Hold on one second. This is what the Russians, no, this is what Trump had to say about the dollar. I played this before. It's 21 seconds. Helen, I want you to respond after this to show, to tell me what your thoughts are.
We're losing the dollar as the standard because of these people that are so, if we lose the dollar as the standard, that's like losing a war, and it'll never happen with me. There's no way that will happen with me. We got to put it back together. We cannot, that is like losing a war.
Losing a war. The war is already lost.
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. It's just that the war is already lost. I mean, like I said earlier, this is basically shared delusion is the only thing that's keeping the dollar's value artificially elevated. And yeah, Trump would go and shoot himself in the foot, shoot all of us in the foot in such a way by starting a trade war with China that would really finish off anything that's left of the dollar's value in terms of an international currency. The sanctions that he was fully in support of and continued to pass, and that the Biden administration then picked up. It's each one picks up where the other one leaves off. As you said, there is very little difference between their foreign policies. And yeah, we've lost the war, Trump. I hate to break it to you. He's a little slow sometimes when it comes to these important things. And he blamed his ignorance for what his failures in his first term, and as if he's somehow learned. But every word out of his mouth regarding foreign policy shows that he has not, in fact, learned, and he's just willing to subject us all to this mass human sacrifice that's being conducted in the name of, making America great again. Well, newsflash, making America great again doesn't involve sacrificing your entire country to Israel. That's just, the two are incompatible.
And he said that he would stop the Ukrainian war overnight. Here's his chance. We'll see if he can stop it overnight. And listen, there's a lot of blame to go around with Harris and everything else, but we were addressing comments that were put up, and we were trying to inform people of the truth of what's going on behind closed doors. But you notice, I want to play something that former president and prime minister of the Russian Federation has to say about the U.S. elections. I just want you to hear this.
Well, Russia, the Soviet Union, and the Russian Empire existed while different U.S. presidents were in office, so we shouldn't overestimate their influence on global processes. They do hold a lot of sway, but they're not gods who rule the world. At the end of the day, we don't really care if it's Kamala or Donald. We're absolutely sincere when we say it's up to the Americans. They need to make this choice. However, I must say, and I agree with you, that there is a difference, and it's not even in the candidates' attitude towards Russia, especially given the fact that their positions can be self-contradictory. For example, Trump just said that he killed the Nord Stream pipeline and whatnot. We get that. There's a presidential campaign going on, so they have to make provocative comments and so on. And he makes them all the time, burnishing, among other things, his own image. All the American let me paraphrase that. A non-mainstream politician can't become a U.S. president. Trump is the least mainstream of all mainstream politicians because he's never worked for the government, and yet he's still part of the mainstream. That's why he's not going to do anything that could be frowned upon by what's known as the deep state. I'm not talking about some kind of conspiracy. I'm talking about a network of very influential politicians, business people, bankers, etc., who can have a major influence on the current developments. As a result, it's always going to be a mainstream figure at the helm of the U.S., whatever his or her name is. One could be more unorthodox. Another one could have less experience. Still, there's a difference. Let me explain. If the new president ardently pours fuel in the fire of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, it would be a very bad policy, because this would be a road to hell. This would really be a road to World War III. Both of these candidates must be aware of that. Be that Mr. Trump, who has been in the presidency and should have an idea about how these things work, or Kamala Harris, who, shall we say, doesn't have much experience and gets criticized because of that. However, she has worked as vice president. Whoever makes decisions that will help protract this war is going to make a very dangerous mistake.
What do you have to say about that? Because it seems like he summed it up in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, basically that nobody gets to the level of national politics without being favored by what he refers to as the deep state, which, I mean, the term means different things to different people, but it is this network of permanent power that is not elected and that is not subject to the whims of the people, as if the elected politicians are, but that's beside the point. Yeah, he's basically saying that there's not really a perceivable difference in terms of the ultimate power mover is going to be the deep state, whether or not it's Trump's or Harris's face on it. And I mean, he didn't say this, but I think he said something similar in the past. It is that, like, they don't like Trump because he puts an ugly face on empire, and Biden, I guess, or rather Obama, because this was back when Trump was first in office, that Obama put a nicer, friendlier face on empire. Maybe it wasn't Medvedev who said that, but I think it was somebody in the Russian government who said that. Maybe it was Lavrov. But it just, yeah, it's. They don't like him, not because of his policies. His policies aren't really that different, but because he makes them look buffoonish. And we are ultimately, in terms of foreign policy, in terms of the wisdom of our foreign policy, which is about to pitch us into nuclear war and destroy what's left of this nation's credibility in terms of being a serious country with any sort of aspirations to elevate humanity above the muck. It's all about to get blown up just because these people can't think beyond. There's like a test they give kids when they're young to see whether they have like the ability to think ahead or keep things in mind for the future. And it's a marshmallow. They give them the opportunity to have the marshmallow now or have two marshmallows later. And the entire American political class is going to eat that marshmallow now, and they can't even conceive of possibly getting two marshmallows 10 minutes down the road. If there's a possibility, oh my God, I can get the marshmallow now. Oh, you mean I can get the marshmallow? And the entire country is subjected to these losers. So it's a problem for sure.
Do you think that Trump somehow he wants to really make America great again, but he's constrained because America no longer has the unrivaled military power. She no longer has the unrivaled economic power. She no longer has the unrivaled political clout or whatever. If he truly wanted to, don't you think that it would be better for America to stop antagonizing everybody around the world, to pull back in stages some of the bases to show you truly want this, so that people will then stop dumping your dollar and stop moving outside of the so-called rules-based system? Because otherwise, it's boom goes the dynamite. Because more nations by the day are moving outside of the U.S. dollar.
Yeah, I think that he would like to see America's situation improve, but I don't know if he has the intellect to really understand that the current paradigm is completely toast. I mean, there's no way to move forward in terms of United States being the unipolar strongman that's telling everybody else in the world what to do. If he genuinely does mean well, it would behoove him to like take advice from people who aren't homicidal maniacs and or blackmailed by Israel, because it's just, I don't understand how you can be a thinking human and still think that this is a good idea to go around the world antagonizing all these other either superpowers or second tier wannabe superpowers. Because yeah, you have to play nice with others at this point. We are, for better or worse, a global species at this point. You can't just wall yourself off for certain purposes and then run around the world kicking in people's sandcastles and expect that people are going to give you any sort of respect. Because I mean, as we're seeing now with Israel, it's finally becoming considered socially acceptable to acknowledge what Israel is, which is a monster and an organized crime ring masquerading as a country, masquerading as a religion. And 2 years ago, you would have gotten in trouble if you say that, but now just people can't ignore it because they're on the news every night murdering children and grinning and smiling and dancing while they do it, which is just horrifying to see. So, I mean, the United States, and similarly, ever since I think the Iraq War was probably the first one where it became very obvious to the rest of the world exactly the degree to which we were just complete sociopaths trying to impose our will on a world that had no interest in taking orders from us anymore, because we lost at any sort of moral ground to criticize or tell anybody else what to do. Just this idea that we're going around the world spreading democracy. I mean, Pompeo, of course, is responsible for the term molecules of freedom, which basically means we're going to cut you off from any sort of sources of energy and force you to buy our overpriced liquid natural gas because we blew up your pipelines, or we sanctioned your normal source of oil. And so molecules of freedom it is. The fact that that's delivered with a straight face really sums up the degree to which this country has just become a morally bankrupt husk of anything that the founding fathers once stood for. I mean, the Constitution is a very noble document. Declaration of Independence, great. I mean, if this country actually practiced what it preached, we would be in a very different situation. But if Trump does genuinely want to make America great again, and it's questionable whether he does or not, or whether he even knows what that means, I would love to actually interview the guy, but I know that's never going to happen. I see so many conflicting, like, depending on who he's talking to, he presents a very different message. He does come across as sincere sometimes, but then he gets up and completely shills and prostrates himself before the people who financially control him. So it's just, I really don't know on what he even understands the word great to mean. Like, does that mean just being hated and feared by every other country? Or does that mean being respected and having people want to work with us? I think if you ask any sort of third world, what used to be called the third world country, who they want to work with, China or the United States, they're all going to say China, because China will come to your country and build bridges and build dams and give you power plants and stuff. And the United States will come to your country and suddenly there'll be terrorist groups everywhere. And we need to we need to build a military base here. And I'm sorry, we polluted all your aquifers with our military base, but we got to keep you safe from those terrorists. So it's just, it's night and day, and nobody is falling for our crap anymore. And Trump needs to realize that if he wants to have any sort of credibility. Actually, what we should do is just appeal to his ego, because if he wants to go down in the history books as being this great president that he thinks he is, it would behoove him to save America from itself, save America from its deep state, and actually, start working with countries instead of against them. Stop sanctioning the places like Iran, which, I mean, we could actually work together with Iran and get a lot of things done. But unfortunately, we have this little problem called Israel in the way, and it's destroying our future.
And Nick Hall, he's making fun. So don't take this serious. He was talking about Medvedev stop interfering in U.S. politics on the because of Russiagate and Russia interfering. But nobody talks about this. Let me play this one. Why is it that China is interfering? They were even saying that Iran was interfering, and that's another thing. Trump was like, "There's no." Right before he was elected, he said, "There's no information indicating Iran is trying to assassinate me, but I believe Iran is trying to assassinate me." And I'm like, so
ridiculous.
You remember that? So listen, I'm going to play this minute and 22-second clip. You can hear the U.S. Politicians always talking about Iran's interference in the politics, China's interference in U.S. politics, Russia interfering in U.S. politics. But no one ever talks about U.S. interference in other nations' politics. And this is what the people are saying in Georgia. Right.
First of all, Salome Zubishvili is a CIA agent, a numbered agent. Everybody knows this, the Georgian people, we all know this. And she's stating as fact that these were Russian elections. If these were Russian elections, if Russian money was behind these elections, why then was the opposition taking part? Why was Salome Zubishvili supporting the opposition if it was Russian elections? You know why? Because do you remember when the law on foreign agencies was adopted? Back then, Salome Zubishvili also said that it was a Russian law. They wanted to encourage the majority of the people to take to the streets. She's doing the same thing now. And what the opposition is saying now is not the view of the opposition, but of American special services. Together with Ukrainian militants who are already here in Georgia, several of them, as many as 50, are already here. Moreover, this Goncharenko, who came here as if he was an observer, he is not an observer. He's a revolutionary. He's a terrorist. He's a fascist. I mean, Goncharenko has come here, as well as some fascists and militants who want to destabilize the country. They want to take the people to the streets, but they haven't been able to do that yet. But if the majority of the people take to the streets, they'll create a provocation, like they did in Ukraine in 2014.
He's right.
I played that clip because in Moldova, America and Europe quickly accepted the election results, even though there was a lot of election maneuvering and barring pro-Russian Moldovans from voting. And then you have Georgia, which most nations said was a free and fair election, but the United States is now threatening sanctions, and so is Europe, because the winner was not a Western stooge. I mean, how deeper can you go into election meddling than that?
Yeah, you had Sullivan actually get up there and say about how basically, oh, yeah, that democracy, you're doing it wrong. Sullivan is such a non-credible entity anyway. He comes off like a used car salesman. He's like not, and the fact that he's literally wagging his finger at Georgia and saying, no, that's not how you vote. What are you doing? You have to vote for the guy we like. And that's not seen as meddling. The fact is that this color revolution playbook that they try to get a candidate, I mean, they tried to do the same thing in Belarus a couple years ago. They've done it in most parts of Eastern Europe at least once or twice. And I think they tried to put up a guy against Orban in Hungary recently. And of course that failed miserably because Hungarians are not stupid. And that's the thing, is the United States just treats these populations as if they're stupid, as if they're going to fall for this clearly synthetic candidate who's clearly backed by the U.S., whether it's National Endowment for Democracy or one of its puppet organizations. And the people have had enough, because they see what happens to countries that end up with a U.S. puppet in their thing. All their financing goes to Ukraine. And these countries need their financing for their own countries. And then if you stand up against financing Ukraine, you get shot, like the Prime Minister of Slovakia. So it's just like nobody wants to go down this path, because, like he said, you end up like Ukraine, and that's nobody wants to end up like Ukraine. That's for sure. Not even the Ukrainians at this point.
And I want to play one more clip, and this is from Dmitry Medvedev again. And this is about America. He's describing America's actions around the world, and he says it very good. So
Americans always tried to rule by creating crises on the planet. This was the case, well, at least in the 20th century, and it continues that way in the 21st. When the Soviet Union collapsed, America felt that it had no equal at all after the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. So the more crises they create, the better they think the situation is for America. Well, they've created a crisis with these sanctions. What happens? It's all very simple. The Americans make money. America, as always, feels good. It makes money from weapon supplies and by allocating money to its defense industry. Sure enough, some of that money gets stolen in Ukraine or somewhere else. Still, though, it means that the defense industry and a lot of other economic mechanisms in the United States continue to work. Moreover, a lot of businesses have been persuaded to move over to the United States from Europe, where it has become unprofitable to work. That is, the Americans are getting what they want at the price of more blood and casualties. This is why Americans are engaging in feeding the war. But that system is coming to an end. That's why they feel the world is falling out from under their feet, and they're resisting it in every way possible. You've mentioned BRICS here, and there's also the SCO, as well as other regional unions. There are Asian unions that are very important in today's world, and where America has no say at all. It is seen as hostile there, even though those unions were not originally created as anti-American. In fact, I find the idea of the Global South and these kind of unions very promising. Why? The Americans and their satellites keep saying, you are violating the rule-based order. But when you ask them what that order is, and I've deliberately picked through legal text, studied them, It's incomprehensible. It's not clear what the order is and who approved it. It's really just an idea of the United States and its allies, well, mostly in NATO, of how best to do business in the world. So it's not a written document, not an international convention, it's not a UN act or any other act, it's not the UN Charter, it's just something, an order that they think is right. And once you're out of this order, you're a perpetrator. Of course, this is a very unstable system that is bound to collapse sooner or later. And those inside that system will suffer the most from its collapse. I'm absolutely sure about that.
Yeah, with friends like these, who needs enemies? Is what
I know you have something to say about that.
Yeah, with friends like these, who needs enemies is what he's saying. Because, all these European nations that throw in their lot with the United States, they end up, their pipelines get blown up, and Germany's economy is completely in shambles right now because it trusted the United States and has trusted them for decades, and it's just ended them in a world of hurt. And all these other countries end up their best interests get subjugated to those of the United States. So they're forced to buy overpriced liquefied natural gas because their pipeline is severed, or they're forced to just give up all of their budget to financing a war that is against their best interest, because why would they want a destabilized country on their borders? So, and they're forced to just let in millions of migrants, which is a whole other can of worms that I don't know if we really have time to open, but they're forced to go along with all of these policies that are not in their best interest. Rules-based international order is whatever the United States says it is at any given time. So of course it's self-contradictory. And it's just, you can't run a country, you can't run an international alliance on that. And it's just they've tried to drum into these people's heads by training them with the World Economic Forum, Young Global Leaders Program, and other similar initiatives that the only way forward is to just defer to the United States in every way. But as Medvedev was saying, there is some hope with these alliances of groups that have nothing to do with the United States and don't take their orders from the United States. And that's really the only way to move forward, because otherwise you're just forming your own pattern for policy, whether it's foreign or domestic, based on a faulty model of the United States, which has failed miserably. And I think we can all safely agree on that at this point. We have failed miserably as a nation, and there is turning back, but we would have to have will in the political class, and I just don't think we have that, and I don't think that there's any quick and easy way to get it. I think our only hope is to sort of fortify our own communities against the predations of the federal government. And I mean, I don't know, maybe it's time to give secession a go. I don't know if that'll probably get me in legal trouble again, but it needs to be said, and just going along to get along is not helping anybody. So we got to do something.
Do you think the reason that America is becoming more belligerent in her policies is because behind closed doors they have done the math? And they see that there's a mathematical impossibility for the debt to be paid off, and that what they're doing now is trying to cause chaos everywhere, like scorched earth policy. If I cause chaos here and I can hold the barrel of a gun to these people here, they'll be forced to continue with the dollar, and I'll be able to live over there. Did you hear me?
You kind of cut out the last bit, but I think I understood what you're asking. You're asking if they're doing this, they're enforcing this chaos on the world in order because they don't want to be around when the check comes due, basically. And yes, I think that is exactly what they're doing. They realize that the national debt, I mean, this idea that it's only 31 trillion or only 31 trillion. So it's like $300 trillion at least, if you take into account all the forms of debt that we have going on, and that's nonsense numbers. There's no way we can ever possibly repay that. So yeah, it's basically they're running around trying to create as much confusion as possible. This is the sort of thinking behind causing these crises, these polycrises, as World Economic Forum talks about, in order to create so much chaos that then they can, unbeknownst to the vast majority of the population who are dealing with these crises, slip in certain forms of control that will prohibit any sort of uprisings from people who realize just in the incredible ways in which they're being screwed, whether it's central bank digital currency that comes with a social credit score that basically if you say unkind things about Miriam Adelson or Benjamin Netanyahu, then suddenly you go to the ATM and whoops, no, you can't get your cash out, or rather they won't even have cash to begin with. It'll just be, you go to put in your card details on Amazon and oops, you can't order that wrong think book because we don't want people, spreading subversive ideas. This is why the United States has sort of tried in multiple levels, multiple different agencies rather, have sort of tried to overlap domestic terrorism with like basically narrative challenges, like the idea of cognitive infrastructure, that there is a United States cognitive infrastructure, and that narratives that challenge the government narrative are attacks on this cognitive infrastructure, is extremely ominous. And I don't think people are taking it nearly as seriously as they should be, because they're dead serious about this. I mean, NATO considers narrative challenges to their really unbelievable nonsense, low effort BS that has really, because it was never challenged in the past, they never had any sort of drive to make it more believable or make it at least something that like a person with fundamental critical capabilities could believe in for more than 5 seconds without questioning it. I mean, it's basically like the Easter Bunny level of believability there. And so challenges to that are considered terrorism. And they're very serious when they refer to domestic extremism as being just people who post tweets and comments that they don't like, and that they're, as soon as they can get their head out of their ass, they're going to start seriously going after. I mean, they're going to start. They've already been going after people like that. Anybody who was at the event on January 6th and was there when to see the feds in action starting their riots, and has since been hunted down like dogs for basically being in the wrong place at the wrong time, understands that. And it's worse than you think, and you don't really believe it until it happens to you. So don't let it happen to you. We need to actually head this off at the pass and not allow these programs. And Trump is just as bad as the Democrats in terms of enacting these programs. William Barr had this one called the Deep, which was, the idea was to head off like people who were mobilizing towards violence. So they would analyze your social media posts and sentiment analysis and decide that, oh, well, this person looks like they might commit a mass shooting because they've been watching videos that we don't like. And so we can intervene to have them medically evaluated or perhaps committed against their will. And there was another one like ARPA H, which is like DARPA, but with health instead of defense, Health Advanced Research Projects Agency, I believe. And that was a project of Ivanka Trump and Kushner. So they were the ones pushing it, rather. They didn't come up with it, of course. They have never had an original thought in their lives. But these programs are bipartisan, and the only one who ends up losing is the little guy. So there's this idea that, we can, if we side with one party or the other, then maybe they'll eat us last. Well, no, I'm sorry. They have a pretty healthy appetite, and they're going to eat all of us if we let them. So just don't let them. It's that simple.
So I want to play a couple clips. There's just short clips back to back, and this is about the dollar and its tenuous, I would say, precarious situation that it now finds itself in. And in my mind, just a rational thinker, if I'm in debt, if I'm in a hole, I'll stop digging, and maybe stop cursing out the person that can throw the rope down to pull me out of the hole or whatever. But it seems like there's no rational or sane thinking or guidance or even forethought for the leadership in not just America, but the Western world today. And it is leading us to a dollar collapse, which, the dollar is the life's blood of the empire. And without that, you have no U.S. military hegemony. You have no sterling pound security. You have no Euro stability, and you have no EU unity, because all of that hinges upon dollar hegemony. I want to play these clips for you real quick. They're short clips, and I want your take on. There are 3 clips back to back. I'll play. One is here.
And de-dollarization of the world economy that I've already mentioned is another step in that direction. The share of national currencies in Russia's settlements with SCO countries and Eurosec countries has exceeded 90%. And in BRICS, we're about to hit the 65% mark, and this figure is growing. Russia will continue playing an important role in this process, considering our position as the 4th biggest economy, according to the IMF, in global purchasing parity. And work on creating new payment platforms started in BRICS under Russian chairmanship and will be continued by our Brazilian counterparts in 2025. Experts forecast not only an increase in the share of national currencies in the world trade, but also the formation of several macro regions with their own standards, norms, regulations, and added value chains. In a situation where egotistical actions of the United States brought to a situation where the once global system is quickly getting fragmented, the trust towards dollar is falling quickly. But in any situation, we will continue strengthening the mechanisms of the Eurasian Economic Union, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and other structures in the Eurasian continent and other parts of the world, opening new horizons of truly beneficial and equal cooperation that benefits all its members without exclusion.
6. Yes, it's the 6th. So I'm sorry, I was giving a date out to my wife that was standing, but she came in and asked me what the date. I want to play the next clip here. It's 1 minute in like 30, 40 seconds.
Look, it goes beyond these things. Just today, Brazil, in our hemisphere, largest country in the Western Hemisphere south of us, cut a trade deal with China. They're going to, from now on, do trade in their own currencies, get right around the dollar. They're creating a secondary economy in the world, totally independent of the United States. We won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years because there'll be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't have the ability to sanction them.
Now, this drive toward de-dollarization that we see led by countries like China and Brazil is angering the United States. And a clear example of this was the neoconservative Republican Senator Marco Rubio from Florida. When he heard about the news of China and Brazil de-dollarizing their trade and using their local currencies, Marco Rubio was furious. And on Fox News, he complained that if countries drop the dollar, the U.S. will no longer be able to sanction them. That's a very revealing quote because it's really a U.S. official admitting that by maintaining the dominance of the US dollar around the world, the United States is able to weaponize its currency and turn it into a geopolitical tool to attack any country that carries out policies that Washington doesn't like. So the US has imposed sanctions on countries that represent 1/4 of the global population, including China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Zimbabwe, Syria. There are so many people living under brutal sanctions that prevent them from doing trade, prevent them from exporting, that cause massive economic problems and inflation at home and a lack of certain goods, a lack of medicines and technology. So this explains why countries around the world are looking for alternatives to the US dollar.
So, and the last little short clip is this one here. I want you to pay close attention because all of them are like being weaved together so that I can get your take on your perspective of what they're saying. Here we are.
After the end of the Cold War, America tried its level best to become make it a unipolar world. And we saw their efforts through military applications and all that. But ultimately, world has transited towards the multipolarity. And if you remember the president of Russia, he also said in St. Petersburg that multipolarity is a reality and it is important. And I also say this, and every country like Pakistan, which are the smaller countries, they are happy with the multipolarity because unipolarity means one country and then one country's rule all over. Multipolarity means more cooperation, distribution of power, and it is going to be more good for the people of all the countries and especially our region, the East, because the next century is going to be, as they always say, this century is going to be the Asian century. And Asia means Russia, Asia means China, Asia means South Asia, Asia means Eurasia. It is from the West, from the Europe, from the East, from North, from South, everywhere people are coming. So this is an expression of this thing that people like multipolarity to happen. People like to be in touch with Russia. People like to participate in World Discussion Clubs events. So it is a universal participation. It is not that they have been able to isolate Russia.
So your take on this, because they're talking about the nations moving away from the dollar and the United States doing her best to try to reconstitute what's left of the so-called unipolar world when we have already started going into the multipolarity.
Yeah, it's like, well, that, like the last guy was saying, the toothpaste is already out of the tube. I mean, we are in a multipolar world, whether they like it or not, and whether Marco Rubio thinks that it's acceptable or not. He's like a little child throwing a tantrum saying, oh, well, I should be allowed to be king of the world, even though I have like no power to enforce my will on anything because I've completely sold out my power generating faculties to organize crime, masquerading as a country, masquerading as a religion. But yeah, it's, the multipolar world is already here. And people, smaller countries are much more willing to give Russia or China a chance because they've seen what the United States ruling the world has done and that it's not working for them. So they're open to alternatives. And having more than one locus of power in the world is always going to be a better thing because you can at least pick which flavor of shit sandwich you're going to have to eat. And pardon my language, but it's just like it's always better to have choices. No matter what the choices are, even if the choices are maybe not your favorite, it's better than just having one choice that sucks. So it's just like common sense. And the fact that the United States refuses to accept this, I mean, we're going to get left behind. This is, if Trump wants to make America great again, he's going to have to make America relevant again. And right now we are speeding into irrelevance faster than ever before. I think it's just nobody wants to be part of our shared delusions anymore. Even our Hollywood movies are not selling abroad like they once did. This idea of the American, not even the American dream, but the American merchandise, the epitome of American merchandising, let's say, the American lifestyle is not nearly as popular as it used to be. Maybe some rich Chinese people will still be emulating what they think the American lifestyle is, but more and more countries are realizing that their own culture has, a lot more to offer than this morally bankrupt husk called the American culture, quote unquote, which it is like, yeah, cultured the same way bacteria is cultured, maybe, but it's not something that you really want to. It's not fulfilling. It's not going to give you meaning in life. It's just, okay, well, I can buy more things than the next guy and I can eat my way into an early grave. And if you look at our life expectancy, I mean, that really tells the whole story. It's been declining under the great Anthony Fauci. And this idea that any other country would want to emulate what we're doing is just ridiculous. There's no logical reason to believe that unless you're Marco Rubio.
Do you believe that the leaders have lost all foresight and they don't do a deep dive into themselves? Because if we look at this situation and look at the two candidates right now, Harris and now President-elect Trump. Harris wanted to continue on because, Joe Biden and the rest of them have a lot of financial ties in the Ukraine. Trump wanted to focus more on Iran and China. Now, what's crazy about this is that we know that Harris had no political insight. She was just a puppet to do the bidding of the powers behind for Ukraine. I mean, to offset and to destabilize Russia. But why won't other people on the other side acknowledge this? That if the Trump administration focuses on on China, then it will lose big because 93 to 95% of all goods on the shelves come from China. If a war breaks out, China will embargo the United States. If China embargoes the United States, guess what happens? Shipping shuts down, transit shuts down, banks go belly up, businesses go belly up, unemployment explodes, and your economy collapses. And then there's a stampede out of the dollar, which means that your life's blood of your economy and your empire goes down the toilet. Why is it so hard for people to see that?
I think in general, a lot of Americans are ignorant about how products that they buy reach their shelves. I think that they don't take into account the fact that China does really manufacture everything we use in our day-to-day lives. People just assume that they walk into the supermarket and the food just grows there. It just magically appears on the shelves. And if they start acknowledging things like we do depend for our lifestyle on the ease of which China can ship goods into the United States, in order to, we understand that this is necessary for us to continue in our quote unquote first world lifestyle, it requires us to acknowledge a lot of other things that are more unpleasant, such as, well, if our big hero wants to cut off China, then we're screwed. To some degree, it's ignorance. To another degree, at least in the political class, especially, because if you look at our political class, they're much older than a lot of other countries' politicians. Our average age in Congress is, I forget the exact number, but if you look at Congress, there's a lot of like 70s, 80s. I think there's a couple of 90-something-year-olds in there. And that's just short-termers. These people don't have to deal with the fallout from their actions. They can enrich themselves now. Maybe if they have children, although a lot of them don't, maybe they have children that they hate and they don't really care what happens to the children. But a lot of them just don't really have to care because they don't have any skin in the game anymore. And so they're willing to just sell out the country because they have no real attachment to it. They've been conditioned for so long. This is another thing that other countries are different from us in that we have so many career politicians who've never actually done anything outside politics, so they don't really understand like the idea of working for a living or like trying to produce anything or exchange their labor for any for goods or services or money, whatever. They just understand how to ask people for money and get money from lobbyists and then do this lobbyist bidding. It's a completely different way of existing, where other countries, well, people who go into politics usually do so after they've achieved something in some other area of life, or maybe after they've had a family, or after they've worked in a company, or whatever the case may be. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that people end up in politics, but I think that our country disproportionately, we have a political class that they went right in from school into graduate school, and then into a management consultancy, and then into they worked for a candidate, and then they became a candidate, and they just go through this whole parasitic system where they're always performing to somebody else's expectations, and maybe they're very good at performing to somebody else's expectations, but again, they've never had an original thought in their life. They've never had to work for a living, unless you consider just like, again, servicing other people's expectations to be working. But I mean productive labor, like actually putting in work that you can see something at the end of the day. You've produced something, or maybe you've written something, or you've got an idea out there that's changed the world. But no, this is just a parasite feeding off itself. And so when you have people who look at the world in this way, and maybe their highest aspiration is, how can I get one over on the next guy, because he has more boats than I do, or he has more cars than I do, and I don't like that, so I'm just, and I want to take him down. But there's no attempt to like have a shared interest and maybe like elevate the entire social group, or elevate. It's just a very different way of looking at things than I think. And I mean, you can't blame capitalism for this in whole full stop, but there is a way in which capitalism is practiced in the United States, which I don't think is inherent to capitalism at all. I think a true free market would require people to actually have a better product than the next guy. But what we have is crony capitalism, aka fascism, a fusion of the state and corporate power in an authoritarian manner that controls speech and other attempts at free expression, because it's so hopelessly insecure, realizes it's selling a substandard product, in this case, the American product, the American experience. And so it has to control all sort of alternatives, because it realizes that anyone who has the opportunity to make a choice, as those clips were talking about, is going to choose against the American way, because it's just not appealing anymore. And I mean, I think if anything, it's one of the reasons why they might have the borders flooding open and just importing these people millions at a time, is because, it soothes their wounded ego. Oh, here's some people who want the American dream still. Really? No, we're still really popular. Everybody loves us and wants to be us. See, look at all these people that we're paying millions of dollars to come into the country. No, they're not just here for the free stuff. They really think that we're a shining city on a hill. Yeah, sure, dude.
Well, hell, this will be the last clip of the night. And I want you to listen to this. And I'm playing this clip because I got 2 requests from some of the regular viewers and channel members or whatever. So I'm going to play this clip, and it talks. And this clip is about 2 years, maybe a year or 2 years old, or something like that. It could be a little bit older, but think about how worse off the situation is from when these guys are discussing how bad the situation is in America. And I want you to listen to this clip right here. So guys, I told you I would take some of your requests and play some of the clips again. So here's the clip right here. And after that, I have to have your thoughts on this.
Okay.
So here we
Pay
go.
close attention.
Dr. Francisco, just before the break, Clive made the point that you're trusting the medium rather than the person. When it comes to the United States, I don't trust the person or the medium. I'd be happy if I never bought another American thing or saw another American dollar because I don't like bullies. Isn't this partly the end of the era of the bully?
I think multipolarity is here. I think that's the key, and the dollar is dying. There is no question about it. Let me give you some figures that are quite important. The GDP of the United States is 24 trillion. The debt, the public debt, is 30 trillion. The difference between the total gross domestic product and the debt is 6 trillion. 6 trillion is equivalent to the combined GDPs of the whole of the Latin American countries together, including Brazil. That gives you an idea of the problem. That's number one. There is a US debt clock, which you can find in the internet. I ran it before coming to the show. And I ran it for 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, the amount of debt that increased in the United States was 8 billion. Now, 8 billion is, if you have 3 of them, that is the GDP of Nicaragua. If you have 5 of them, that's the GDP of Bolivia. The United States have a very serious problem with infrastructure. Their productivity is low. The number of bridges in the United States that require urgent repair, not repair, urgent repair, is 65,000. The quality of the road, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, they produce a report every year, 42% of the roads are mediocre or in need of repair. The electricity plants, airports, and so on. Everything is a complete mess. The United States doesn't have high-speed trains. It doesn't. Sorry to say like this. Even Spain has them. So that gives you an idea of the problem. And the United States economy is growing at a rate of something between 2 and 1%. The Chinese economy, with all the problems, is growing at a rate of 7%. So that means in the next 10 years, arithmetically, the US economy is going to be 20% bigger, and the Chinese economy is going to be 70% bigger. Now, if you take what countries have done regarding this question of the dollar, possibly people do not know, but China and Japan are conducting their foreign trade in their currencies. Iran is conducting their business in no dollar. Russia and China, Iraq, and many other countries. But the recent decision by the Saudi Arabia to actually conduct the selling of their oil to China in yuan. Now, China buys 25% of the total output of Saudi Arabia. This is 30 billion. The United States purchases only 7%. So if you keep going down, you can see that there is already a multipolarity of initiatives. What we don't have is the international architecture, financially speaking, so that there is a system which is coherent, is international, it works, it has legal security that gives you legal confidence that if you enter into a transaction in that system, you know, whatever it is going to be respected. That has to happen, but it's beginning to take place already. So the United States is in a real trouble, and it doesn't have any possibility. I just looked at the budget that Joe Biden presented to Congress for 2023. It's a very long document. It has three key components. Number one, domestic security is going to give to the police domestically huge amount of resources. The organization Black Lives Matter said this is not what we want. You know what happened when they have resources. And basically, Biden is trying to get votes from the right by doing this. That's number one. Number two is international security. He increased the budget, the military budget, to 773 billion, which is 30 billion more than in the previous administration. And surprisingly, he's going to apply a tax of 20% on the fortunes of 100 million upwards, which is going to produce 360 billion. And it's going to reduce the budget deficit and the deficit of the United States by 1 trillion in 10 years. So it's totally useless. And in order for this budget to be passed, he needs to win it in the House, in Congress. He's got a majority.
Control over which he may well lose in November.
Certainly, but at the moment, if we were to propose it, he will pass it in the House, but he will not be able to pass it through Congress because there is 50-50. And Democrat right-wing, Joe Manchin, already said he's not going to support it. So it's already, not only is useless as a proposal to recover the economy, but it's already dead before it begins. So that gives you an idea of the problems that they have. So the issue, strategically, from their point of view, is this. Do they continue waging war against everybody else? And who else is there to wage war? Their calculation, it seems to me, was if we are able to bully Russia and make them accept our way, and then later on we'll continue with that until, we produce something equivalent to regime change, isolating China thereby, and therefore the next move is to attack China. And this one hasn't worked. The next one is certainly not going to work. So the United States is desperate because it's facing a very serious challenge. Number one, energy and resources from Russia to Europe, which really needs them, and the Belt and Road Initiative by China, which is, at the moment, is in the region of $5 trillion. So therefore, facing with this huge, very attractive embrace from these two nations that have huge resources, one natural resource, the other one technology, markets, money, and credit, and investment, infrastructure, is very difficult to say no. So the only possibility for them is war, war, war.
Yeah. So what is your take on that? Before we close out tonight, what is your take on what this guy described the position of America?
Well, as he said, the era of the bully is coming to a close. And I think there is a glimmer of hope there, because if you look at in the past, when a country went off the dollar in terms of their currency, like Iraq did, they got hammered. I mean, they got full-on invasion. They got completely destroyed. And then when Libya tried to start a gold dinar for all of Africa, Pan-African gold currency, they got completely leveled. Libya now went from being having the highest standard of living in Africa to being like below a third world country, just a complete mess, and still is to this day. Now you've got Saudi Arabia, which is the underpinning of the petrodollar, is doing trades and not the dollar, so they're not getting hammered. In fact, the U.S. is sort of trying to hush it up when these other countries go off the dollar. That sort of proves that, at least on some level, there is an understanding that we cannot keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting it to work, because the magic is gone. You can no longer cast a spell on the entire world's population saying, yes, we are the rulers of the world. Pay no attention to the fact that we have literally nothing to back it up, including Fort Knox's those gold bars that are supposed to be there. Well, oops, we kind of gave those away to Israel, and they're not there anymore. But I think that there is some hope that the year of the bully may actually be coming to a close, if only just because they're running out of people to make war with. China won't take the bait. We've been trying to provoke China for a while now. They might try to pull some bullshit in Taiwan, but China has been through this China's been doing this whole statecraft thing for longer than many times longer than America has been around, and they know not to fall for stupid provocations. And the same with Russia. I mean, they've handled the Ukraine situation. I've had some issues with some ways in which they've handled the Ukraine situation, but in general, they're mopping the floor with us. And I mean, the amount of death that's been going on over there has just been appalling, and it is dwarfed only by the amount of death that's going on in the Middle East right now. But I think that finally the rest of the world is realizing that the rules-based international order is a paper tiger and that there's nothing there, that you open the book and it's all blank pages. And while there's going to be a lot more carnage unless the American people stand up to their leaders, which I just don't see it happening. I mean, the American people can't even stand up off the couch, let alone stand up to their oppressors. So if that were to happen, we could end this very quickly. As it is, it's going to be this slow collapse, like the Hindenburg crashing into whatever the Hindenburg crashed into. You know, I don't actually remember, but the point is that it crashed, and that's what we're doing right now. And everybody has got a front row seat, whether they want it or not. And it's just, I hope that we can end this with minimal death in terms of just these populations that are being caught in the crossfire between a parasite clinging desperately to its way of life and people who just want to be free, just want to be left alone. And I think that we need to stop putting our trust in these fake heroes like Trump or Elon Musk or whoever your fake hero might happen to be, and take control of your own destiny, because that's the only way we're going to beat this thing. And it's just the system has outlived its ability to sustain itself. And the sooner we realize that and the sooner we move on, the better we will all be.
Boom. That was a mic drop moment, and Helen hit it out of the park. Helen, thank you again for joining me on the Red Pill Diaries. I'm going to send you the link to the video right after the show, so be on the lookout for that.
All right. Thank you for having me.
All right. Be blessed and be safe.
You too. Have a good night.
You too. Everybody, thank you all. We're not going off the air just yet. I want to say something to you all. Man, you guys kick butt. I'm going to be honest with you. My chat, the audience, thank you so much for joining me. You guys kick butt. We've been going through. This is, now I want to say this. This is not YouTube. See, I blame who needs to be blamed. This is StreamYard trying to mess with the stream. YouTube says excellent connection. My cable monitor says excellent connection, and the pauses and the buffering has to come from the host, which is StreamYard. I pay these people every month, and this is what happens. So I want to thank everybody. Share the video, like the video, and remember to join all the platforms. We're now on BitChute. It's called the Red Pill Diaries Official. I think that's what it's called. We're on Twitch. We're on Twitter, Rumble, Odyssey, Locals. If you join us on Locals, it's free. It's the empowerment of truth.locals.com. And there's something else. It slips my mind. What else are we on? Did I say Odyssey? We're on Odyssey. Check us out. Spread the word. We're going to keep hitting you with facts. Friday, we have Carl Zabak on the show. I think this is episode 9 of our series called The War Report, even though he and I have done roughly about 12 or 13 shows together. Friday, we'll be doing that. Patrons and channel members, remember, we got something coming up this week before the week is out, okay? So be looking forward to that. On that note, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for giving me another hour of your day and another day of your time. I'd like to thank all of you who listen live and those who will download or look later. And remember to do right by others, not because others are watching or because you want something in return. Do right by others because it's the right thing to do. And when no one else is watching, always remember that God always has his eyes stayed on everybody. All right? On that note, know that I love you all if you love truth, but know that the love that I have for each and every one of you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. Thank you for joining me. We're out of here. Peace.